Next up, let's actually start with the new devices. Let's start on a bass, which gives us an excuse to talk about Pulveriser and the Line 6 stuff, which is from Record, but obviously it's new to Reason. So, Combinator, excuse me. If you're wondering why I'm coughing all the time, I've got this thing called catarrh, which is notoriously difficult to spell, where I've got like a cut in my throat and it builds up phlegm, which is pleasant. And it just sits there. You have no idea how much editing I have to do on my tutorials to get rid of all the coughs and stuff, so apologies for that. But here's our Thor instance, which we're going to use as a kind of basis. And basis? Haha, puntastic. So our wavetable, we're going to find ourselves... Ooh, smooth. Not at all what we want though. Random Science is quite good if I remember correctly. If we get rid of the filter, because even though this is a bass, ironically enough, dubstep basses, especially the modern ones, they tend to be all mid-range and top, and then the sub just deals with the bass. So you're more concentrating on the high end, so you don't want to remove too much of that. In fact, probably boost some of that later. So we'll get something like that going on, just modulating delicately, like a flower. Or something more heterosexual. We're going to route LFO 1 to oscillator 1, pause. Okay, that'll do for now, just to give us a starting point. You did obviously layer this. We might go into that in a bit, but I wanted to get through quite a lot in this video without boring you too much, so we'll see how it goes. So here's the dirt being applied from the Pulveriser. Oh, it's painful. Maybe bring this up a bit. Oh. So without Pulveriser and with. That is nice. Add it to bandpass. I can change the tone, squash it a bit to get some compression going on. See, Pulveriser has compression, distortion, filtering, LFO, and you can also blend in the original source sound as well, which is quite cool. But I really like the idea of this follower. The follower allows you, obviously if you were using the LFO, you'd have to make sure it was synced to the same LFO that this was. However, follower, it finds out what the audio signal's volume is, and depending on the volume, it modulates the filter and even the rate up here. So it actually dynamically finds out, it kind of syncs itself up to the LFO of this one, which is really clever. So, for instance, I've got this on bandpass at the moment, which is quite good for basses. It allows you to, as I said, focus on the top end rather than the bass, and then you can bring in some of the lower end that way. So we've got, bring that threshold, and then if we bring it up to follow the frequency, maybe bandpass is a bit subtle in this sound, but just without that, and with it, I think I prefer it on. The other sounds we had. See, that's really thin at the moment. Maybe if I have another wavetable in there. Also on random signs. Okay, as I was saying before, layering is key with this kind of thing. So, bring that. Oh, there we go. If I filter it first, then squash and dirtify it. So without the Pulveriser, and with it, that just really makes it nice and piercing. So that compression does quite a lot there. This option is basically changing the order of the routing, going from the filter, then squashing it, then adding the dirt, the distortion. I've called the distortion dirt, the compression squash, filter is still filter, and the LFO is tremor. Very nice. all adds to this kind of industrial thing they've got going on. You can bring in the low frequencies there if you want, but I'm probably going to add a sub separately. Yeah, and you can also add the tremor to the volume, which is quite a nice touch. So if you wanted to wobble purely from amplitude, then you can do that. One thing, while I was talking about amplitude, a few of you were asking, does Reason 6 have VST support yet? Nope, it doesn't, and I don't think it ever will, to be honest. I'll just start making this sub bass while I'm talking. One of Reason's best features, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, is that it's really stable because it doesn't allow VST support. Everything is within the box, and you can kind of share your songs with other Reason users really easily without having to worry about VSTs, and that's a feature rather than a detriment to the software. So if you wanted to use VSTs, you can always rewire it with something else, but I really like the fact that they've kept it purely in the box. So that's just a simple sub bass that I've got going on there, as you saw. Just 2 sine waves, an octave apart. Just bring that volume up. You might want to wobble it as well. I've got it on a certain rate, but I'll play with that later. One thing to mention with basses, oh, that's nice, is if you're just wobbling, it tends to sound really old school. And some of you like old school dubstep, that's fine, but a lot of you guys want to make the more modern style, like Nero, Skrillex, that kind of thing. And if you're going to be doing lots of LFO wobbles, then it doesn't help with that. It's much better to play with automation, and Reason's really good for automation, so it's quite convenient. In fact, let's get some down now. So now we've played with this, let's record something. See what we can make out of that. If I quantize the notes, and did you see, before I quantized it, if we have a look here, undo, this note here gets moved to the start of the loop. You've got to be careful doing that if you accidentally play 2 notes, because then you have to delete one of them, otherwise it'll be really messy. Let's make sure both of these are on 1 polyphony or mono legato, just so you only get 1 note at the same time, otherwise the basses get really, really messy really fast. I showed a good example of that in my dubstep guitar video. I had quite a few people asking me where I can get dubstep guitars, incidentally. Quite interesting. Anyway, we've got... That should be the other way around to follow. Oh, here we go. Copy, paste. And fortunately I can change the note here. Let's draw that in. And that's our notes. Make sure the velocities are all the same. When you're doing a more kind of processed sound like this, velocity isn't as important as when you're trying to emulate pianos and strings and live instruments with samples, because that gives a bit more authenticity. But these are so heavily processed, it just you want things to be nice and consistent. So we got that as a kind of basis to the sound. Now, if we go into the show programmer and link some stuff up. I'm going to link the pos from both of these Thor oscillators. OSC1, I think it's mod, they call it here, for some reason. OSC1 mod and OSC2 mod. Linked to rotary 1, both to the same rotary. And Pulveriser doesn't need to have anything linked, because as I said, that follower does it quite nicely. So you can modulate dirt. That's a good way to a good thing to try as well, because people tend to modulate the wavetable position or the filter more frequently. Modulating distortion, or even in Scream 4, you can modulate the scale on the body stuff. That works really well to get some nice sounds. Give that a try. And we've got this kind of setup. Then I guess we can now remove this LFO. I was just showing that it's a good way to test the kind of sound you'll be getting. Let's call this pos mod, because it kind of rhymes and it tells us what it's doing, though annoyingly it still doesn't link, it doesn't put the name that you've assigned it here into the note lane by default, which seems kind of strange to me. But if we draw in a envelope lane there, we can just draw in some bits, see what we come out with. Oh, gorgeous. You can give it different values. In fact, if we do that, we can drag that along to the next instance that we want it to do that exact same sound. So Control C, Control V. And then I can put in something different here. See how that comes out. In fact, I kind of feel like that should be nice and stuttery near the end. To get those stuttery notes, change the snap to 30 seconds and just put them in. Just like that. And you get this. In fact, when that happens, we have a nice kind of a change in the wavetable to emphasize it. That's quite cool. Or even a really prominent one. Ooh, that's cool. And then copy and paste that one as well. Okay, kind of a robotic sound going on. I'm cool with that if you are. Let's move on and see some of the other stuff we've got available. We can make a pad, which is a good excuse to have a look at Alligator.